My family left my 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, at a bus stop, saying, "We thought she was behind us." My sister, Sarah, smirked coldly. "Your pathetic daughter is slow, and she wasn't keeping up with normal, decent people." My mother, Gloria, started laughing cruelly. "Don't worry about nothing. Nothing bad will happen to that ugly little piece of dirt." Everyone started snickering and said, "Even if something terrible does happen to her, she'll probably still be there tomorrow like a stray dog, so don't worry about it." When I confronted them angrily and screamed, "How could you abandon a child like that?" they just ignored me completely and went into the house laughing. So I made one phone call. When police found her hours later, and when I saw the state she was in, I froze. So I turned their world upside down. My name is Alexandra, and I'm a single mother to the most beautiful, sweet 8-year-old girl in the world, my daughter Sophia. Sophia has always been a bit shy and takes her time with things, but she's incredibly smart and kind-hearted. She's never been the fastest walker or the most outgoing kid, but that's just who she is, and I love every single thing about her. The problem has always been my family. My mother, Gloria, my sister, Sarah, and my brother, Steve, have never been particularly warm people, but their treatment of Sophia has always bordered on cruel. They constantly make snide comments about her being slow or weird, and they act like she's some kind of burden whenever we're all together. I've called them out on it countless times, but they always brush me off or turn it around on me, saying I'm being too sensitive or overprotective. The incident that changed everything happened 2 years ago during what was supposed to be a fun family outing to the local mall. My mother had suggested we all go together, her, Sarah, Steve, Sophia, and me. She claimed she wanted to spend quality time with her granddaughter, which should have been my first red flag. My family has never shown genuine interest in spending quality time with Sophia. We met up at my mother's house around noon on that Saturday. The plan was to take 2 cars to the mall, do some shopping, maybe grab lunch, and then head back. Sophia was excited because my mother had promised to buy her a new book from the bookstore. Sophia loves reading, and she'd been talking about this outing all week. From the moment we arrived at my mother's house, the tone was off. Sarah barely acknowledged Sophia's enthusiastic greeting and even made some comment about how Sophia needed to keep up today because they weren't going to wait around for her. I should have taken Sophia and left right then, but I stupidly thought maybe they'd be on their best behavior in public. We drove to the mall in 2 cars. My mother, Sarah, and Steve in one, and Sophia and me in the other. The mall was pretty crowded, which is normal for a Saturday afternoon. We decided to stick together as a group and hit a few stores before lunch. Everything started going downhill almost immediately. Sophia, being 8, would sometimes get distracted by store displays or stop to look at something interesting. Nothing unusual for a kid her age. But every single time she'd pause or fall back a few steps, one of my family members would make a comment. "Come on, Sophia, we don't have all day," Sarah would snap. "She's holding everyone up again," Steve would mutter under his breath. My mother would just sigh dramatically and shake her head like Sophia was committing some terrible crime by acting like a normal child. I kept trying to diffuse the situation, encouraging Sophia to stay close and telling my family to be patient, but the tension was building. Sophia could sense it too. I could see her getting more and more anxious, which only made her move more cautiously, which only made my family more irritated. It was a vicious cycle. The breaking point came when we were walking from one end of the mall to the other to get to the food court. There's a long corridor with shops on both sides, and it was particularly crowded that day. Sophia had stopped for maybe 30 seconds to look at some stuffed animals in a toy store window. When she turned around to catch up with us, my family had kept walking and were already a good 20 feet ahead. I, of course, waited for Sophia, But when we caught up to the group, Sarah whirled around with this look of pure disgust on her face. Seriously, Alexandra, can you control your kid? She's being completely ridiculous. She's 8 years old, Sarah. She stopped to look at toys for 30 seconds. That's normal. Normal? My mother laughed coldly. There's nothing normal about a child who can't keep up with a simple walk through the mall. She's embarrassing. Sophia's face crumpled, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. That's when Steve chimed in with his wonderful contribution. Maybe she should just stay home next time if she can't handle being out in public like a normal person. I was furious, but before I could respond, Sophia tugged on my sleeve and whispered that she needed to use the bathroom. I told my family we'd meet them at the food court in a few minutes, and I took Sophia to find the nearest restroom. In the bathroom, Sophia broke down crying. She asked me why Grandma, Aunt Sarah, and Uncle Steve were so mean to her, and what she had done wrong. My heart absolutely shattered. I held her while she cried, and assured her that she hadn't done anything wrong, that sometimes grown-ups are just mean for no good reason, and that I loved her exactly the way she was. We spent about 10 minutes in that bathroom while I helped Sophia calm down and clean up her face. When we finally made it to the food court, my family was nowhere to be found. I called my mother's cell phone. No answer. I called Sarah. No answer. I called Steve. No answer. I figured maybe they'd gone to a different part of the mall. So Sophia and I spent the next hour walking around looking for them. We checked every store we'd been to earlier, the parking lot, everywhere. They were gone. Finally, my mother called me back. "Oh, Alexandra, we thought you and Sophia were right behind us. We're already back at my house." I was stunned. You left us. How did you not notice we weren't with you? Well, you said you were going to the bathroom. We assumed you'd catch up. This made no sense. We'd been looking for them for over an hour. They had to have known we weren't with them. Mom, we've been looking for you everywhere. Why didn't you answer your phones? We had them on silent. Look, just come back to the house when you're ready. Sophia and I drove back to my mother's house, and that's when everything went completely off the rails. When we walked in, my mother, Sarah, and Steve were all sitting in the living room laughing about something. They barely looked up when we entered. "Did you have fun at the mall?" my mother asked Sophia in this fake, syrupy voice. Sophia, still upset from earlier, didn't respond. She just stood close to me, holding my hand. "What's wrong with her now?" Sarah asked, rolling her eyes. That's when I lost it. What's wrong with her? You guys abandoned us at the mall. She's upset because her own family treated her like garbage all day and then left her behind. The response I got will haunt me for the rest of my life. Sarah actually smirked. Not smiled, smirked. This cold, cruel expression crossed her face as she said, "Your pathetic daughter is slow, and she wasn't keeping up with normal, decent people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excuse me? My mother started laughing, actually laughing. "Oh, don't worry about nothing, Alexandra. Nothing bad will happen to that ugly little piece of dirt." Steve joined in the laughter. Even if something terrible does happen to her, she'll probably still be there tomorrow like a stray dog. So don't worry about it. They were all laughing. All three of them were sitting there laughing at my 8-year-old daughter, calling her ugly, comparing her to a stray dog. Sophia was right there. She heard every word. I screamed at them. I really screamed. How could you abandon a child like that? How could you say those things about her? She's 8 years old. They completely ignored me. They just kept laughing and went back to their conversation like Sophia and I weren't even there. When I kept yelling, demanding an apology or at least some acknowledgement of how horrible they were being, my mother waved her hand dismissively and said, "Alexandra, you're being dramatic. We're done talking about this." Then they all got up and went into the kitchen, leaving Sophia and me standing in the living room. I was shaking with rage, but more than that, I was heartbroken for Sophia. She was crying again, quietly this time, and she kept asking me why they hated her so much. I decided right then and there that I was done with my family, done with their cruelty, done with their treatment of my daughter, done with everything. I took Sophia home, and I started planning. But first, I made one phone call. I called my family back and told them that Sophia and I were going to go on a little trip the next day. I said we'd probably be gone for a few hours, and I'd call them when we got back. I made sure to mention that we'd be taking the bus because my car was acting up. The next morning, I got Sophia dressed and ready. I told her we were going to have a fun adventure, just the two of us. We took the bus to the downtown area, about 30 minutes from home. There's a really nice park downtown with a playground, and Sophia loves going there. We spent about an hour at the park, and then I told Sophia I had a surprise for her. I said we were going to play a little game of hide and seek, but a special version, where she had to stay hidden until some friends of mine came to find her. I know how this sounds, and I know you're probably thinking I'm a terrible mother, but please let me explain. I had Sophia hide behind a large oak tree in a quiet part of the park, away from the playground, but still visible from the main path. I told her to count to 100 very slowly, and then if she didn't see me, to stay hidden until some friendly people in uniforms came to help her. Then I left. I got back on the bus and went home. 20 minutes later, I called the police and reported my daughter missing. I told them we'd been separated at the downtown park and I couldn't find her anywhere. I gave them a description of what she was wearing and told them she was shy and might be hiding if she was scared. The police found Sophia after about an hour and a half of searching. I had given them a very detailed description of where we'd been playing and what she was wearing, and they'd systematically searched the park area by area. When they found her behind the oak tree, she was scared and crying, but she was physically fine. They brought her to the police station, and I met them there. When I saw Sophia, I put on the performance of my life. I cried, I hugged her, I thanked the officers over and over. I told them how relieved I was and how sorry I was that we'd gotten separated. But what I wasn't prepared for was the genuine terror I felt when I saw the state Sophia was in. Yes, I had orchestrated this situation, but seeing my little girl so scared and traumatized hit me harder than I expected. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, her clothes were dirty from hiding behind the tree, and she was shaking like a leaf. When she saw me, she collapsed into my arms and wouldn't let go. "Mommy, I was so scared," she whispered into my neck. "I thought you forgot about me too, just like Grandma and Aunt Sarah and Uncle Steve did." My heart absolutely shattered.
Even though this had been my plan, seeing Sophia connect this experience to what my family had done to her at the mall made me realize just how deep their psychological damage went. She genuinely believed that the people who were supposed to love her would just abandon her and forget about her. The police officers, Detective Marcus Hall and Officer Thompson, were incredibly kind to both of us. Detective Marcus knelt down to Sophia's level and spoke to her in a gentle voice. "Sophia, you were very brave today. You did exactly what you were supposed to do when you got scared. Can you tell me what happened?" Sophia looked at me for reassurance, and I nodded encouragingly. She told them about playing hide and seek, about getting scared when I didn't come back, and about staying hidden like I'd told her to. She was so honest and innocent in her explanation, and I could see that both officers were moved by her story. Officer Thompson pulled me aside while Detective Marcus continued talking with Sophia. "Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask, how exactly did you and Sophia get separated? The park isn't that big." I had prepared for this question. I explained that Sophia had been having some anxiety issues lately related to family problems, and that I'd been taking her to the park more often to help her feel better. I said that I'd been on a phone call with her therapist, which was true. I had called Dr. Allison earlier that day, and when I finished the call, Sophia was gone. I claimed I'd searched everywhere before calling the police. "What kind of family problems?" Detective Marcus asked, rejoining our conversation. This was my opening. I took a deep breath and told them about the mall incident. I described how my family had abandoned us, how they'd made cruel comments about Sophia, and how Sophia had been having nightmares and anxiety attacks ever since. Yesterday, my mother called Sophia an ugly little piece of dirt right to her face, I said, my voice breaking with genuine emotion. My sister said Sophia was pathetic and slow. They compared her to a stray dog. She's 8 years old. Both officers looked horrified. Detective Marcus wrote everything down in his notebook, asking for specific details about what had been said and when. Has this been an ongoing pattern? For years, I admitted, but it's gotten worse lately. Sophia has been asking me why her own family hates her so much. Yesterday was the final straw. When they abandoned her at the mall and then laughed about it, I knew I had to do something to protect her. Detective Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You mentioned Sophia's been seeing a therapist. Dr. Allison. Yes. She specializes in childhood trauma and anxiety. She's been helping Sophia process what's been happening with my family. I'd like to get Dr. Ellison's contact information, if that's okay, Detective Marcus said. Cases involving potential emotional abuse of minors require follow-up, and we'll need to document Sophia's psychological state. Perfect. This was exactly what I'd been hoping for. While we were talking, Sophia had been coloring with some crayons Officer Thompson had given her, but I noticed she kept looking up at us with worried eyes. She'd been through enough trauma for one day. Officers, I really appreciate everything you've done, but I think Sophia needs to get home and have some dinner. This has been a really scary day for her. Of course, Detective Marcus said. We have everything we need for now. I'll be in touch about the follow-up investigation regarding the family situation you described. As we were leaving the police station, Sophia tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, are you going to tell Grandma and Aunt Sarah and Uncle Steve that I got lost today? I knelt down to her level. Why do you ask, sweetheart? Because they said terrible things would happen to me and they wouldn't care. I don't want them to be happy that I was scared. The innocence and pain in her voice made me want to cry for real this time. Sophia, honey, you don't have to worry about them anymore. I'm going to make sure they can't hurt you with their mean words ever again. How? By making sure they understand that what they did was wrong and that there are consequences when adults hurt children. Sophia nodded solemnly. Like when I get in trouble for being mean to someone at school? Exactly like that, except these are grown-up consequences for grown-up meanness.
Over the next few days, I carefully documented everything that had happened. I wrote down every detail I could remember about the mall incident, including the exact words my family had used. I made copies of text messages and voicemails they'd left me afterward. I even drove back to the mall and took pictures of the area where they'd abandoned us, noting the distance from the bathroom to the food court and the busy crowds that would have made it obvious we weren't with them. Detective Marcus called me 3 days later to follow up. He'd spoken with Dr. Allison, who had provided additional context about Sophia's psychological state and the impact of the emotional abuse. He'd also reviewed the security footage from the mall, which showed my family leaving the food court area, while Sophia and I were clearly not with them. Mrs. Johnson, based on our investigation, it's clear that your daughter has been subjected to a pattern of emotional abuse by your family members. While emotional abuse can be harder to prosecute than physical abuse, we take these cases very seriously, especially when they involve children. What does that mean exactly? It means we're going to file a report with Child Protective Services. They'll want to interview you and Sophia, and they'll likely recommend that Sophia have limited or no contact with the family members who have been abusing her. This was music to my ears, but I made sure to sound appropriately concerned rather than excited. Will Sophia have to go through a lot of questioning? I don't want to traumatize her further. CPS has specially trained investigators who work with children. They'll make sure Sophia feels safe and comfortable. The goal is to protect her, not to put her through more trauma. The CPS investigation took about 6 weeks. The caseworker, Ms. Garcia, was wonderful with Sophia.
She conducted multiple interviews over several weeks using age-appropriate techniques and play therapy methods. Sophia was able to express how her grandmother, aunt, and uncle made her feel without being re-traumatized by the process. Miss Garcia also interviewed me extensively about the family dynamics and the history of emotional abuse. I provided her with Dr. Allison's reports, the police reports from both the mall incident and Sophia's disappearance, and all the documentation I'd been gathering. The CPS report was damning. It concluded that Sophia had been subjected to ongoing emotional abuse and psychological harm by her grandmother, aunt, and uncle. It recommended that Sophia have no unsupervised contact with these family members and that any future contact be contingent on them completing parenting classes and family therapy. But my family's reaction to the CPS investigation was what really sealed their fate. Instead of being horrified that they traumatized a child, instead of apologizing or seeking help, they went on the attack. Sarah called me screaming about how I was destroying the family and how I was using Sophia as a weapon against them. She accused me of coaching Sophia to lie to the investigators and threatened to expose the truth about what a terrible mother I was. Steve sent me a series of increasingly angry text messages, calling me manipulative and crazy. He said Sophia was obviously mentally unstable and that I was enabling her weakness instead of helping her become stronger. He even suggested that maybe Sophia would be better off in foster care if I couldn't handle raising her properly. My mother's reaction was the worst of all. She left me a voicemail that I will never forget. Alexandra, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this ends now. Sophia is my granddaughter, and I have rights. If you think you can keep her away from me with these ridiculous accusations, you're mistaken. That little girl needs to learn that the world isn't going to cuddle her forever. Sarah and Steve and I were trying to help her develop some backbone, but instead, you've turned her into a victim. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in making her even weaker and more pathetic than she already was. But mark my words, this isn't over. I will not be kept away from my granddaughter by a hysterical single mother who can't handle the truth about her defective child.
I saved that voicemail. I saved all of them. When I played these messages for Detective Marcus and Miss Garcia, they were appalled. Here was clear evidence that my family not only refused to acknowledge the harm they'd caused Sophia, but they were doubling down on their abusive behavior and threatening to continue it. Mrs. Johnson, Miss Garcia said after listening to my mother's voicemail, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've rarely heard such a clear example of ongoing psychological abuse and complete lack of remorse. Your family members are demonstrating that they pose a continued threat to Sophia's emotional well-being. Detective Marcus agreed. These messages show a pattern of harassment and continued abuse. Combined with the original incidents and the CPS findings, I think you have grounds for a restraining order. That's when I knew it was time to bring in the lawyer. I had researched family law attorneys extensively and had chosen Brooke Wells specifically because of her experience with custody cases involving emotional abuse. When I called her office and explained the situation, she agreed to see me that same day. Brooke's office was in a professional building downtown, and her credentials were impressive. She had a law degree from a top university, 15 years of experience in family law, and a track record of winning difficult cases involving child protection. When I walked into her office, I brought everything: police reports, CPS reports, Dr. Allison's evaluations, recordings of the harassing voicemails, copies of all the threatening text messages, and my own detailed written timeline of events. Brooke spent over an hour reviewing everything, asking detailed questions about each incident and taking notes. When she finished, she looked up at me with a serious expression. Alexandra, I want to be very clear about something. What your family has done to Sophia constitutes emotional abuse, and their continued harassment and threats demonstrate that they pose an ongoing danger to her psychological well-being. You're not overreacting or being dramatic. You're protecting your child from people who are harming her. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. After years of being told I was too sensitive or overprotective, having a professional validate my concerns was incredibly affirming. What are our options? I asked. Several. First, we can file for a temporary restraining order based on the harassment and threats they've made since the CPS investigation began. The voicemails and text messages provide clear evidence of their continued abusive behavior. What would that accomplish? It would legally require them to stay away from both you and Sophia. No contact, no coming to your home, no showing up at Sophia's school or activities. If they violate the order, they can be arrested. And long-term, we can petition for a permanent restraining order based on the pattern of emotional abuse and the professional recommendations from CPS and Dr. Allison. We can also explore a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I was intrigued by the civil lawsuit option. Tell me more about that. Intentional infliction of emotional distress is when someone deliberately engages in extreme and outrageous conduct that causes severe emotional distress to another person. Based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, your family's behavior towards Sophia clearly meets that standard. What would we be seeking in terms of damages? Compensation for Sophia's therapy costs, both past and future, pain and suffering damages for the psychological harm they've caused her, and possibly punitive damages to deter them from future abusive behavior. The more Brooke explained, the more I realized that I finally had the tools I needed to protect Sophia and hold my family accountable for their actions. How long would this process take? The restraining order hearing would be scheduled within a few weeks. The civil case would take longer, probably 6 to 12 months. But Alexandra, I want you to understand that once we start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will be permanently damaged. I thought about Sophia's tear-stained face at the police station. I thought about her asking me why her own family hated her so much. I thought about my mother calling her an ugly little piece of dirt and my sister calling her pathetic. Good, I said. It should be permanently damaged. They've been emotionally abusing my daughter for years, and they're not going to stop. If anything, they're getting worse. Brooke nodded approvingly. Then let's get started.
The restraining order hearing finally arrived, and it was everything I'd hoped for and more. Brooke had prepared an extensive case. She had Dr. Allison's report and letter, the police report from Sophia's disappearance, documentation of all the harassing calls and messages from my family, and my own detailed written account of years of emotional abuse. My family showed up with a cheap lawyer who clearly hadn't prepared very well. They seemed to think this was all going to blow over and that they'd be able to charm their way out of it. They were very wrong. The judge listened to everything. The mall incident, the cruel comments they'd made about Sophia, the pattern of emotional abuse, the impact on Sophia's mental health, everything. When it was my family's turn to defend themselves, they completely fell apart. Sarah actually had the audacity to claim that they'd never said those things about Sophia, that I was making it all up. But when the judge asked her directly if she thought it was appropriate to call an 8-year-old child pathetic and slow, she stumbled and started backtracking. Steve tried to claim that they were just being honest about Sophia's issues and that I was being oversensitive. The judge was not impressed with his logic. My mother tried to play the victim, crying about how she was just trying to help Sophia become more normal and how I was keeping her away from her beloved granddaughter. But when Brooke presented the evidence of all the harassing calls and messages, including several where my mother called Sophia weird and embarrassing, her crocodile tears didn't hold much weight. The judge granted a permanent restraining order that would remain in effect for 5 years. My mother, Sarah, and Steve were ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Sophia and me at all times. They were prohibited from contacting us directly or indirectly, including through social media, phone calls, texts, emails, or third parties. The judge also ordered them to complete anger management and family therapy before they could even petition to have the restraining order modified, and they had to pay all of my legal fees. But that wasn't the end of it. Brooke had also helped me file a civil lawsuit against all 3 of them for intentional infliction of emotional distress.
The lawsuit was based on their deliberate and systematic emotional abuse of Sophia, the psychological harm they'd caused her, and the cost of her ongoing therapy. The civil case took about 14 months to resolve, but it was worth the wait. My family's lawyer tried to get the case dismissed, claiming that their behavior didn't rise to the level of intentional infliction of emotional distress. But Dr. Allison's testimony was devastating. She explained in detail how their treatment of Sophia had caused genuine psychological trauma and how their behavior met every criteria for emotional abuse. The jury was out for about 4 hours before they came back with a verdict in our favor. They awarded us $45,000 in damages, $15,000 from each of my family members to cover Sophia's therapy costs, both past and future, and compensation for the emotional distress they had caused her. My mother, who has always been obsessed with her reputation in the community, was absolutely mortified. The local newspaper had picked up the story, and suddenly everyone in town knew about what she and my siblings had done to Sophia. Her church friends, her neighbors, her book club, everyone was talking about how Gloria Williams and her children had emotionally abused an 8-year-old girl. Sarah, who works as a real estate agent, saw her business tank almost immediately. Word spread quickly in our small town, and people didn't want to work with someone who would call a child pathetic and ugly. She ended up having to move to a different city to rebuild her career. Steve, who's a manager at a local manufacturing company, got called into HR after several coworkers complained about working with someone who would abandon a child and compare her to a stray dog. He didn't get fired, but he was passed over for a promotion he'd been expecting, and his work relationships became very strained. The $45,000 went straight into a college fund for Sophia, along with covering her ongoing therapy costs. Dr. Allison worked with Sophia for about 18 months, and she made incredible progress. She's now a confident, happy kid who knows that she's loved and valued exactly as she is.
As for me, cutting my toxic family out of our lives was the best decision I ever made. Sophia and I are closer than ever, and we've built a beautiful life together without their negativity and cruelty. I know some people might think I went too far, that I was too harsh, or that I manipulated the situation. But here's the thing. My family had been emotionally abusing my daughter for years. They abandoned her at a mall and then laughed about it. They called her ugly and pathetic to her face. They compared her to a stray dog and said they didn't care if something terrible happened to her. I tried reasoning with them. I tried calling them out on their behavior. I tried setting boundaries. Nothing worked. They continued to hurt my child over and over again, and they felt completely justified in doing so. So yes, I set them up. I orchestrated a situation that would finally give me the evidence and leverage I needed to protect my daughter from their abuse. I made sure that their cruelty had real consequences for once in their lives. And I don't feel bad about it for 1 second. Sophia is now 10 years old, and she's thriving. She's confident, she's kind, she's doing well in school, and she has good friends who appreciate her for who she is. She has some memories of what happened with my family, but Dr. Allison helped her process those experiences in a healthy way. Most importantly, she knows that I protected her from people who were hurting her, and I made sure they faced consequences for their actions. That's all that matters to me. My family has tried to reach out a few times over the past 2 years, usually around holidays or Sophia's birthday. They send cards or gifts through mutual acquaintances, trying to get around the restraining order. I returned everything unopened. Sarah actually showed up at Sophia's school about 6 months after the restraining order was issued, claiming she just wanted to see her niece. The school security called the police immediately, and she was arrested for violating the restraining order. She spent 2 nights in jail and had to pay additional fines and court costs. My mother tried a different approach about a year later and started attending the same church Sophia and I go to. She would sit in the back and try to make eye contact with us during services, staying just over 500 feet away, but clearly violating the spirit of the restraining order. After I reported this to the police as harassment, she was warned that attending any location specifically to make contact with us could be considered stalking and would result in additional charges. They just don't get it. They still don't understand that their behavior was abusive and harmful. They still think they're the victims in this situation. But that's not my problem anymore. Sophia and I have built a wonderful life without them. We have friends who love and support us, we travel together, we have fun adventures, and we create our own family traditions. Sophia has never once asked me why she doesn't see her grandmother, aunt, or uncle anymore. I think on some level, she understands that they weren't good for her. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting my family out of our lives so completely. The answer is no, not for one single day. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When someone repeatedly hurts your child and shows no remorse, protect your child. When someone thinks it's acceptable to emotionally abuse an 8-year-old and laugh about it, they don't deserve to be in that child's life. I protected my daughter from people who were hurting her, and I made sure they faced consequences for their actions. That's what a good parent does. Sophia is happy, healthy, and loved. She knows her worth, and she knows that I will always stand up for her. She's growing up to be an amazing young woman, and I couldn't be prouder of her. My family can live with the consequences of their choices. Sophia and I are living our best life without them. We have friends who love and support us, we travel together, we have fun adventures, and we create our own family traditions.